Hello everybody, it's Q&A time, and it's 1 p.m. Toronto time, or where I'm from on the East Coast, 12 noon. I'm sorry, flip that around, the exact opposite. I'm really excited to go through the question and answers today, and there was quite a few from yesterday that didn't get to, which I apologize. However, if you were with us yesterday and I didn't get to your question, please ask them again. I'm always happy to. Welcome everybody, good to see you, throwing you some waves. And of course, there's a little question mark sign below. Please feel free to hit that sign and ask away. Thanks everyone for joining, it's so good to see you all. And by the way as well, the little sign, or the little two symbols that have the happy faces, those are to come on live with me. And if you have a question where you want to appear live, then by all means, press that. And I'd be happy to see you. Good morning from India, says Sanjeev. Well, I appreciate that, and I just made myself a nice espresso, so all my Indian friends, I will say that the best drink I've ever had was tea from India. It was extraordinary. Okay, hi everybody, good to see you. I finally made it. Amur Rimi, I'm glad you did. Hello from Ukraine. Guide Pavel, good to see you guys. Lisa, what brand type of macro filter do you recommend? Yes, Tiffin. Tiffin make really good ones. And if you can find them online, or better yet, support local at your local camera store, then definitely get those. Now, for those who don't know what a macro filter is, it's a really inexpensive way to get close-ups. Now, close-ups, for example, like really small flowers or insects, people use what's called a macro lens. And this macro lens is fairly expensive, but it does allow you to get really close to whatever object you're trying to photograph. If you don't have the luxury of getting a macro lens, then you get a macro filter. That's a little screw-on filter that goes on the front of your lens, and it's very cheap. They could be only $10, I'm not sure, but because I haven't used them in, I think, 20 years. However, it's a great way to get into small photography. If there's anything that you like that's small, now maybe you don't like insects, not many people do. However, if you have flowers around, you can do a lot of great close-up work with flowers using these macro filters. So I would definitely say get into that. Get the filters first. And then what you can do is, once you get a taste for macro photography, then you can invest in a macro lens. Okay, hey everybody, welcome. Brooklyn, I love Brooklyn. Rick Mentore. Some of my greatest experiences have been in New York, photographically speaking. With my brother's company, I did a TV series in New York. Actually, it was around North America, but the best times were in Brooklyn. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and great coffee, of course. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you all. Costa Rica, thank you for joining. Lynn S. Pix, hi. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to pop down to a question. Soulful lens. Will the camera focus properly with an ND or a polarizing filter? What a great question. The answer is, I would say 80% of the time. Yes, it will. And the reason why I say 80% of the time is primarily because when any lens camera combination encounters darkness, whether it be dusk or early morning or inside your house, it has to have that much more, what would you say, sensing ability to find contrast in the scene to focus on. So when you put an ND, neutral density, or polarizing filter on your lens, the lens does struggle to capture or to see enough contrast to get the proper focus. Now, if you're outdoors, it's not really a concern. So that's why I would say 80% of the time it's perfectly fine. However, if you are in a dark area and you have your ND or polarizer filter on, you may consider doing what's called a pre-focus. Now, a pre-focus is such where you take the filter off, you focus on the subject using autofocus if you want, then you flip your lens and your lens and or your camera to manual focus, put the ND or polarizer filter back on, and then you've locked in that focus. That's what I suggest. And this is really easy when you're doing a tripod. It's a little bit more awkward when you're doing handheld, but that's what I suggest that you do. Great question. Okay, let's see what else you have here. Thanks for teaching me to shoot manual. Awesome, I'm so happy to hear that. And usually what I do suggest, and I'm going to be sipping from my coffee before it gets cold. It's still cold here in Eastern Canada, and that's why I'm wearing 2 jackets right now. When people get off of the auto mode and they want to get into manual settings and less auto, I usually suggest a path of aperture priority first, then learning shutter priority, and then learning manual. And that is usually a good progression, I find. So auto, aperture priority, shutter priority, and then manual. And if you look on your DSLR dial, there's an MASP, MASP. Of course, in Canon, Nikon, it may be switched a little bit, but M is for manual, A is for aperture priority, S for shutter speed, and P is for program. And those different types of creating images that utilize the exposure triangle, it's usually confusing for people when they get into DSLR and they want to get off the auto mode. That's why aperture priority, I suggest, is first. At least I find that the majority of my photos are with an aperture priority, so I find it easiest to teach that way. Okay, Srinivas, welcome. Hey everybody. Good to see you. If you're just joining for the first time, possibly, we're doing a Q&A session, and I'm always happy to help. Boris Shachava, best man, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. You are too. Thank you so much. Rick Mentori, who is your inspiration with contemporary photographers do you admire? This is a really great question. And the answer is manyfold, actually. And it's really, really difficult to... what I should do probably is tomorrow is create a list of my inspiration, and especially ones that you guys can find online that would probably help you within certain genres, because I'm a multi-genre photographer, and I especially find that in the history of my photography, the greatest influences have been Japanese photographers. And the Japanese photographers, I find, are of the highest caliber. Now, of course, this is arguable, but I learned by going to Japan and studying the Japanese, both the commercial, the advertising photographers, the fine art photographers. And that's how I got my start. So I would always have to say that my greatest inspirations still, even, are the very high quality Japanese photographers. And then after that, what I'll do is I'll make a little list and I'll go through it tomorrow morning or tomorrow at this session, because it's a very good question and I want to make sure that I cover all of the genres, because I have so many different people who I look to or look up to, or at least have influenced me in the past. Awesome question. Tomla Jones, welcome. Thinker Wax, great name. Mark, what do you think about the camera Fujifilm X100V? I think it's awesome. It's extremely good. For those who don't know what the X100V is, the X100 series started out with, of course, the X100. It was the first camera that Fujifilm created to look retro. And it looked very simple. It looked almost exactly like a smaller version of a Leica rangefinder. And it was a real big hit, especially with hipsters, because it looked good. And it was a really good option for street photography. Street photographers who couldn't afford a Leica camera really got into the X100. And I thought I liked the look a lot, but I didn't get mine until the X100T, it was called. No, I'm sorry, the X100S. And then the X100T came, which was even better. Then, excuse me, the X100F, and then the X100V. So by that count, I think we're up to 4th generation. And the X100V is a brilliant camera. I can't say enough. Now, it's not for everybody because it only has a fixed lens, and that's a 35 millimeter fixed lens. This is a 35 millimeter equivalent, so that would be a 23 millimeter Fuji lens. However, what I do, because I used the X100F in a lot of my work a couple of years ago in Mexico and Japan, I just bought the adapters. You can screw on lens adapters to get a wider view, a 28 millimeter, I think, and a more telephoto view, a 50 millimeter equivalent. So I'm a huge fan of that camera. And if you have the opportunity, definitely get it. Okay, another sip. My coffee's lukewarm. Srinivas, I've joined your digital camera mastery course, but I am using point and shoot camera. My photos are not giving me that satisfaction. What would be the reason? Okay, so are you doing any editing? One big problem that I find, Srinivas, with everybody is they get discouraged because their picture is not, showing up like everyone else's. However, 50% of the work is in editing. And that would be adjusting contrast, color, saturation, and stuff like that. So what I would advise is, Srinivas, that you don't get discouraged. You keep shooting, keep following the course, and be very conscious that you don't put yourself down or be overly concerned because the pictures aren't turning out. It's amazing how much editing we do in order to make the picture look the way we want, because we are artists. Consider your editing software, whether it be an app or Lightroom or whatever, to be your canvas. So when you take your picture, that's step 1. Step 2 is creating artwork. And that could be, it doesn't matter what genre you're doing. When I say artwork, you're creating the picture the way that you want it to be. And you use an app or Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever as your canvas. And the tools are the brushes, okay? So what I advise is that you just get into some app edits. If you need to, and this is for anybody, and by the way, Srinivas is talking about the Digital Camera Mastery course that's on my website, markhemmings.com. I also have a Lightroom Editing Mastery course, if anyone wants to learn Lightroom. And it's the editing that puts your stamp on it. It puts your signature. I'm talking your look. And then I'm sure you're going to find that your images are much more satisfying. It's a fallacy to think that every picture that you take out of your camera is going to be a gem. It usually requires editing. And I know that you can do it. Great question. Hi, everybody. Welcome. And if you just joined, then we're doing a Q&A session, and this one has to be a little bit shorter than normal, and I tell you the reason is I don't have Wi-Fi right now. I am on cell phone signal, so I don't have, when I lived in Latvia a couple of years ago, we had unlimited cell phone plans. In fact, you didn't even ever need to use Wi-Fi because you just paid the smallest amount of money, and you had unlimited cell phone. And it was just a gem. And then it came back to Canada, and I had to pay like the most extraordinary amount of money for the basic 3 gigs of cell phone. Anyway, I apologize for that first world comment rant. Kashmir, good morning from Kashmir. There's so much of the world I haven't seen yet. I would love to visit you, Muzaffar. Okay. Thinker Wax, thanks to your tips, I got the color combination in a photo and composition in a snap. Love your photography sessions. Oh, that's awesome. I really appreciate that, and I'm really happy that I could help out, as always. Okay, Nikki, you just joined. We're just doing a Q&A session. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned this, that this if there's anything that I'm speaking about that you didn't catch or you want me to repeat, I'm putting these onto my YouTube page. And it's at Mark Hemmings Photography School, so I'll get you to write that down if you want. And I've already posted about 4 or 5, I think. And this will be uploaded tonight, or maybe within an hour or two. So you can come back to it if you so desire. That's Mark Hemmings Photography School. Alessandra, good to see you. Welcome. Feel free to throw out any questions. Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Okay, Rick, I can't wait for that list. I can't list 3 Japanese photographers. I love their minimalist style. So do I. The thing is that a lot of us don't experience photographers from other cultures, especially from the far east, because it's just that we don't speak that language, so that their images don't really come into our consciousness so much. However, the amount of skill that's over there is quite extraordinary, as you can imagine. Okay, everybody. Molly Sarah Lou, do you know in Nikon cameras if there is a difference between the Asian and European models? That's very interesting. The answer is yes with regards to warranty. The answer is yes with regards to naming. Now, this is not always the case, but the model names between Asian and European, and we can even say North American, because those are 3 different, what would you say, geographic regions that camera manufacturers deal with, is that they sometimes change the model name. And the earliest time I noticed that was I think it was the Asian model was called the Canon Kiss, but here in Canada and the States it was called the Rebel. And nowadays I think everything's pretty standardized, but there could be a different naming structure. There's definitely a different warranty. But as for the functionality of the actual camera, as far as I know, they are identical. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that there's any issue. However, I don't really advise buying cameras outside of your home country unless you're visiting and it's a good deal, just simply because of warranty. But functionality, you're getting, I believe, the exact same camera model. Excellent question. Okay, I need to go for an official call. We'll call you tomorrow. Thanks for all your answers. Sanjeev, awesome. You have a good official call. All the best and have a great day. Yes, Alessandra, that's a great idea. I will do so. I'll definitely share my favorites. Robin Cole, 9108. What shutter speed works best to capture bees in flowers? My pictures are always blurry. So here's what I advise, Robin, is that you go to aperture priority. You go to, now a lot of people would say, Mark, you should actually go to shutter priority. But hear me out. I want you to go to aperture priority. I want you to go to the highest ISO possible. Actually, what I'll get you guys to do is write this down or come back to what I'm going to say, because it's really important. It's not just for Rob and Nicole. This is what I suggest for all people who are trying to freeze the action of a fast-moving subject. For example, a bee in a flower. That's a fast-moving subject. Go to aperture priority, go to your highest ISO possible, and that could be ISO 5200, 52,000, or anything like that. And use a tripod if possible, but that's not so critical. And with regards to your f-stop, because you're having a smaller object like a bee, I don't advise the lowest f-stop number. I advise f5.6 or f8, and then take the picture. Now, the reason I'm suggesting the highest ISO possible is to give you a fast shutter speed. Now, of course, someone could say, but Mark, you're going to get a grainy picture. True, grainy, noisy picture. But I want you to practice at the highest ISO possible and record what the shutter speed was, okay? And write it down. And then your second shot, after the second bee photo or the second race car photo or the second, whatever you're photographing, lower the ISO incrementally until until you get to a point where the shutter speed is just getting too slow to give you a good sharp picture. This is a very good system for you to study and understand what shutter speed you need to capture a good photo for the moving object that you're photographing. This applies to sports. It applies to anything that's fast moving. Birds, for example. And it may seem a little backwards, but the reason, again, why I suggest you go to the highest ISO and aperture priority is because I want you to get the picture sharp first, and then you can experiment. It's always satisfying to get a photo where those wings are frozen. Even though, yes, it'll have a little bit of noise, a bit of grain, but that's okay. It's better to get the shot than to not. It's better to get a noisy or grainy photo than to get no photo at all. That's my mantra. Great question. Gallery Fashion, DP joined. Welcome. Okay, Boris Chachava, Mark is throwing diamonds. I learned many things from Mark. Oh, that's awesome. I'm very happy to hear that. And just to FYI, everyone, today, again, I just have to cut this one a little bit short because I'm running off of cell phone signal. And my Canadian plan is a rip-off. I only have 3 gigs and I'm paying a fortune for it. Okay. Mark, why Sony is good for commercial photography and why not other cameras? Yes, great question. Sony cameras are great for commercial photography because the sensors, the chips, are made by Sony. They are extremely good and they produce a good, clean, raw image. Now, I will admit freely that I find that the look of Fujifilm images are far better than Sony. But I'm talking about the soul or the how would you say that? Yeah, the soul of the picture I find is better on a Fuji because Fujifilm, when they're programming the way that they interpret light and data, excuse me, my coffee's now cold. When Fujifilm scientists or technicians interpret the light that has reached the sensor, they're interpreting it through the lens of film photography. So, for example, Fujifilm has so much experience creating good quality film. In fact, Kodak was their main competitor. And Fujifilm is able to dial in or to mimic the look of their Fujifilm films from earlier days. And that's why Fujifilm cameras are favorites among street photographers. And fashion photographers like them as well. That's great, but Sony, because of their high resolution, their low price, their excellent quality sensors, are a favorite for commercial photographers. And I hope that answers your question. Okay, welcome everybody. This Barnes on Life joined. Good to see you. We're just throwing out a few more questions and then I have to say goodbye. Hi Mark, I did all of 3 courses and love all of them. Alessandra, I appreciate that. And by the way, what she's referring to are the courses that I teach at markhemmings.com. And I have Digital Camera Mastery, which is sort of it teaches you about the exposure triangle, shutter speed, aperture priority, plus shutter exposure compensation, and Lightroom Editing Mastery and photo shortcuts, which is sort of like a recipe book for photography. Thank you so much, Alessandra. I appreciate that. Okay, love your videos. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. I'm happy to do so. And if anyone is just joining who hasn't been here before, I plan to do these every day while the world is in quarantine. And the reason I want to do this is to keep you guys as not entertained, but as keeping your photographic and creative muscles flexed. How's that? It's my great desire to be a help when I come to the end of my life, if I know that I've helped at least some of you guys with staying creative and really getting a hobby that excites you and that fills your soul, then I will be happy. Okay, Paul Wood, welcome. Welcome, G. Paulman. Molly Sarah Lou says, thank you so much. I'm happy to help out. And Rotemex Travels, very good to see you. Noor Hamoud, I just want to say that I've recorded some videos on my iPhone and applied your tips when I go to nature for photo shoots. That's awesome. Noor Hamoud, I'm glad to hear that, and really hope that you can continue that and get even better, which I'm sure you will. Excellent, excellent work. Okay, Amanda, hello. Am's Photography, welcome. Yusuf, hello, Mark. What's your day? Greetings from Morocco. Yusuf, Morocco is a place that I've always wanted to visit, and it's on my list. I think that the souk, or the chouk, however you pronounce it, is just it's one of my favorite places. Just the smell of those spices and cardamom and the colors and the sounds. It's all wonderful. I've only been to one souk in my life, and it was in the old city of Jerusalem. Actually, twice in my life. Unbelievable. Angel Andres, welcome. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay, Alessandra, that's it. Thanks, everyone. Welcome, Forest Hill Tea, a faithful watcher. So Alessandra says, how is the best way to study the light of the photographers? Yeah, so that's a great question. And whenever you're looking through Instagram or Facebook or magazines and you see street photography or any type of photography that's using outdoor light, what I'd like you to do as practice is tell yourself or ask yourself, what direction of light is this? What type of light? And how did the photographer position him or herself to get that light appropriately? So for example, in me, when I'm doing street photography and I see a shaft of light coming through two streets, then I'll position myself accordingly to make sure that I capture that car or that cyclist or that motorcyclist to hit the ray of light. And that's really good because that allows you to pre-focus, to pre-expose, and when the person comes into your frame, then you have the picture. And I study light, just like I mentioned, and it works really well to understand where light hits the ground and how to position yourself to capture that light. I find that harsh, sharp light is my favorite for street photography. However, it's not my favorite for other things like travel photography. So for travel photography, I'm looking for evening light or morning light where I can have really soft light, which is really good for travel photography. So it's genre-based. And if you ever get into studio photography, that's when you get into learning about light. That is tricky. And I've been a studio photographer for 20 years. I don't do it as much anymore. But man, that's when you learn light. Okay. Let's see what we have here. Arco says, could you suggest a few good Japanese photographers to gain some insight? Yes, I will do that tomorrow. Okay. It's snowing here in Calgary. It could be here on the East Coast. I'm a little bit cold. Best settings to shoot in that light. Yes, when it's snowing, that means that you have less ambient light, usually because the sunlight has to go through all the clouds in the snow. So I definitely want to get you to go to auto ISO, and otherwise you're going to shoot the same way that you shoot normally, except auto ISO will give you a faster shutter speed because your ISO is going to go up. Again, with newer cameras, you're not so it's not so critical that you have the higher ISOs these days, because with each generation of camera or each new model, they usually have newer sensor generations. And these newer sensors can allow for higher ISOs with less noise than the previous generation. So again, my mantra is it's better to get a noisy photo than to get no photo at all because you got a blurry shot. So don't be afraid to go to auto ISO. Jack that ISO up even, and you should be good. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Food photography, best camera and lens. Don't worry about the camera. The lenses, I would suggest if you're going to get a prime lens, get an 85 millimeter, which is really good because it means you can stand a little bit farther back, shoot at a 45-degree angle down at your food, and that's probably good. However, what's cheaper and actually still excellent is a 50 millimeter f1.8. And the reason why that's good is because it's sharp, it's cheap, and if you do need to get sort of, in some of your food, a really good background blur, your f1.8 will do it. So that's what I advise, either the 85 or the 50. And the 50 is super cheap. It's a prime lens, and you can get an f1.8 and it'll do you really well. Okay, hey everybody, welcome. Stay Healthy says Escapade Joan. Excellent, I will, thank you, and you too. Jose, welcome. Mark, good to see you, my friend. Mark is by the way, if you can tap on Mark, do so. You can get some really fun photos. Okay, Rick Montori, what kind of coffee? Well, Rick, I am a coffee snob, and I'm glad you asked that. So, we have roasters here in St. John, New Brunswick. I'm all out of my Rogue coffee. I also love the coffee that Catapult Coffee does produce. We also have Java Moose coffee. These are local, none of those right now. This is simply a coffee that I got at Superstore. Me being a coffee snob, because a lot of our cafes are closed. However, there are, by the way, if anyone from St. John is listening in, Rogue Coffee does deliveries for their beans. So yeah, it's just a pretty standard espresso for me today. Nothing fancy. Okay, hello and Persian greetings from Lithuania. Do you know what? I spent a long time in Lithuania in the 1990s. I hitchhiked around Europe, and I landed in Lithuania and volunteered at an orphanage for 5 weeks, and it was just the most wonderful experience. And when my time in Lithuania was done, I had no idea how to get home because I was kind of tired of hitchhiking. So I went to the port of Lithuania and got on a shipping container ship. It was bound for Kiel, Germany. I didn't even know you could do that. Anyway, I explored the Baltic Sea on a shipping container for a very cheap price, and it was so fun. Welcome. Boris, Mark, the best instructor. I appreciate that. Thanks, everybody. And let's see, let's just do one more question here, and then I do have to say goodbye. How about black and white double exposure? Yes, definitely do it. Now, double exposure is doable in some DSLRs. Some mirrorless cameras allow double exposure. If you can't, then take 2 pictures and then mix them together in what's called Adobe Photoshop Mix. That's MIX. And by the way, if you need any inspiration, take a look at my Instagram posts on Instagram the last 5 or 6 days, and you will see how I merged 2 photos together to create a new piece of artwork. I use Adobe Photoshop Mix app, and the beauty is it's free. And also I explain how to do this on one of my courses called iPhone Art Academy, which is at markhemmings.com. And these are ways to go through your archives in your camera, in your computer, in your hard drives, and stay creative while you're inside. Excellent question. Okay, Ben asks, sorry, one second. Hi Mark, since you mentioned a 50mm f1.8 for food photography, is that okay to use on a crop sensor camera? Yes, it's even better because that gives you a 75mm, which is closer to the 85 that I mentioned. It will be multiplied by 1.5 or 1.6. You're absolutely right, Ben. Macro lens or 50mm prime for food photography. It's very rare that you need a macro lens for food photography, so I wouldn't bother. Of course, it's always fun to have a macro lens, but it's not really useful for food photography usually. So I would suggest a 50mm f1.8, which is cheap, sharp, small, lightweight, which in your case will turn into a 75 millimeter, which is really, really good for food photography and really good for product photography too. So Ben, definitely do that. It's far cheaper, in fact, than the 85 millimeter lens that I mentioned. Great. I love and enjoy landscape photography, says Photos LT. Your videos took me to the next level. Excellent. I have a full frame Nikon, 24-120 and 70-200 2.8. What else do you recommend? Actually, I have that same lens that you have, the 24-120, and it's really good, isn't it? And I use my Nikon D780 for commercial work. I use my Fujifilms for travel and street, and my iPhone for street photography. So yeah, that lens is perfect. And to be honest, I wouldn't suggest you need anything else. You have what you need. Now, there may be a rare time where you want something wider than 24. I haven't really encountered it, to be honest, myself. However, if you look for a Nikon Prime, I wouldn't bother with a Nikon zoom that is wider than 24. If you're going to get something wider for landscapes, get a Nikon Prime that is less than 24. It doesn't matter which one it is, maybe an 18 range or something like that, and you'll be all set. However, with the landscapes that I do, I really find that 24 is actually covers everything I need. However, I'm not a professional landscape photographer, so pro landscape photographers would probably steer you in something a little bit less, like a 20 millimeter or something like that. Excellent question. Okay, Ben, thank you very much. You're a great teacher. Be safe. I will do so. And at that note, I do have to say goodbye, everybody. As I said, I don't have Wi-Fi today. I only have cell phone, and I'm probably burning up a ton of my 3 gigabyte silly, expensive plan that Canadians have. Anyway, it was a pleasure to see you all, and check back tomorrow. And if I didn't get to any of your questions because I missed them because I'm scrolling, then feel free to bring them tomorrow, and let's have some fun tomorrow. Enjoy the day, and for those who are stuck inside, please make use of your creative time by practicing app photography where you can mix your images together to really stay creative. Okay, bye everyone, God bless.